Hello, good morning, everyone. We're going to wait about 1 minute or so. I can see people are filtering in. So what we'll do is we'll give you about a minute to get ready with a cup of coffee or whatever it is you need to be able to engage in the session, and then we'll get going. So in about 1 minute's time, we'll get going. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much for joining us on this Thetius Research Launch webinar. We're really excited to be launching research that was commissioned by our partners at GeoServe, looking into the potential of an integrated voyage operations suite. We've got a packed hour ahead of us, and I'll just very briefly take you through what the agenda looks like. First, we're going to do a high-level overview of the research itself. Good news is, if you're on this session, you're going to get a copy of the research ahead of anyone else as soon as this session finishes. So if what you listen to sounds interesting and sounds like you'd like to learn more, then by all means, download the report when it comes through to your inbox. Give it a full read during your morning coffee and beyond. We're then going to have a panel discussion. I'm delighted to say we've got some expert speakers joining us. Sanjay Kapoor, the CEO of GeoServe, Lee Steve Middleton, the president of Sedna. We were originally planning to have Bill Doby join us, but unfortunately he's stuck on the west coast of the US. And so Lee has very kindly stepped in. Aditya Trayan, the former global head of operations at Maersk Tankers, and Paolo Vaccaro, the head of tanker operations at D'Amico Shipping. So let's dive straight into it, starting with the voyage dilemma. So as part of our research process, as many of you in the audience will know, the way that we tend to work is we'll go out and interview stakeholders across the maritime supply chain to understand their views on emerging technology and how those technologies come together. And as part of this process, we found, as anyone involved, in voyage operations will understand, that the voyage operations team uses a whole raft of different tools to be able to conduct a voyage in as much of an optimal fashion as possible. So there's very, very fragmented systems. There's manual data entry all over the place. One of our interview respondents told us that manual data entry can account to up to 40% of an operator's time day to day. And you can see on the screen here our kind of graphic of the voyage dilemma, looking at actually how you might go about creating an optimal voyage. Internally within your organization, you've got the performance team, accounts and admin, the trading team, the safety team, you've got the operator themselves, you've got external service providers, you've got the ship operator. Surrounding all of that, you need access to information. All of those people are trying to make decisions about the voyage and about how to operate the vessel in the most efficient and effective way possible, and ideally in the most profitable way possible. All of those people need the right information at the right time to be able to make the most effective decisions. But with the way we're currently set up, with this raft of different tools, reliance on email, phone call, and lack of access to this information on mobile devices, it's very, very difficult to be able to effectively, fully optimize a ship's voyage. And that's where the whole concept of a voyage operations suite comes from. So the idea of this is creating a unified digital workspace to integrate all of the commercial voyage functions. So bunkering, port disbursement, vessel performance, emissions compliance, analytics into a single workspace where you've got integration, full integration between all of those tools. So kind of what you have for example, in your day-to-day work, when we look at general office work, Microsoft 365 has become that for general office work, where you have a suite of applications, each with their own specialist function, but all of them integrate really well together. The research here, we found there's a real case for creating a Voyage operations suite that brings together all of these tools and integrates them to make it possible to make the right decisions in the right way and equip every stakeholder involved in the Voyage with the right information. It's important to say that this is not a replacement for a Voyage management system. It's more like the operator's kind of super app. Okay, so that sounds great, but let's look at the reality of how that actually gets achieved. What we found is that a lot of stakeholders are really interested in moving to what we would call intelligent operations. So that is where you're bringing in tools like artificial intelligence to make decision-making better. But when you bring intelligent decision-making tools into a fragmented setup, where you've got applications that are not talking to each other and data that is siloed and stakeholders that are siloed from one another, it doesn't really work very effectively. And so as part of this research, we've kind of developed a framework that looks at going from fragmented operations, which is where a lot, not all, but a lot of operators are today, to initially some level of connected operations where applications are able to talk to each other, but there's still perhaps limited visibility. Then moving over to integrated operations, and that is where you have a united suite with live data and consistent collaboration, not just across applications, but also across stakeholders. Then finally, it's time to bring in what you might call the intelligent layer. So that is bringing in things like AI to do predictive insights, scenario modeling, dynamic forecasting. If you try to bring in the intelligent stuff too quickly, often it just ends up suboptimal. It's really important to go through those stages, and in the report we break down exactly what those stages look like, and how to move from one to the other. Just a little bit of a crash course in moving from one to the other. This isn't something to be thought of as just a technology upgrade. It's a full-blown business transformation, and that requires really strong change management. Something that we often see across all of the work we do at Theseus is that individuals or C-suite leaders get really excited about an application or a suite of applications. They sign the contract, and then actually the real pain then starts, because that's when the change management journey has to begin. And if the change management is not done effectively, you end up potentially only using 20% of the capability of a system. Getting this right requires working across all of the different stakeholder groups within the organization. So you want to pull cross-functional teams together with some commercial awareness of the implications of of using these tools. One thing that's really important that we found is that where this is successful, most often it's being introduced in a modular way. So it's not about taking on a huge monolithic application or set of applications and totally transforming your operations overnight. It's about picking one area to work on to start with, getting some kind of early success, and also learning the lessons that are often quite hard won in a small area, then starting to expand out from there. That is, when you get to that point where it's fully expanded out, that's when you can focus on what we call kind of orchestration. So if you imagine the London Symphony Orchestra or someone similar, you have the conductor in the middle, ensuring that everyone is staying on time, on the beat, playing the right tune. If you can get to the point where your operator is an orchestrator of all the different stakeholders involved in the ship's operations, you'll find that the decision making becomes significantly better. And then finally, coming back to that question around how you avoid those pitfalls, it's ensuring that you start with that foundational layer, then moving to connected and integrated, then moving into layering in intelligence over time. and absolutely be cautious of, and we explore this in more detail in the report, but be cautious of the kind of vendor lock-in and lack of internal alignment across different systems. Those two things together can be super dangerous because you can end up locked into different vendors that possibly don't work well together. As with all Thetis reports, we make some recommendations to industry. Number one is that you want to move away from thinking of vessel operations just as being an operator and move more to that orchestration. So it's a big mindset shift internally with an organization to go from executing isolated tasks to orchestrating data, workflows, and decisions across departments, across different stakeholder groups internally and externally, so that everyone is aligned around good commercial outcomes. Second, integrate systems before trying to add intelligence. If you don't have systems that are able to talk to each other effectively or able to share data effectively, you are going to limit any impact of advanced technologies like AI. And then thirdly, it's all about championing change with the right team. So identifying those internal stakeholders who can be champions of this sort of stuff and driving that transformation through with really effective change management is so underappreciated, but is often the difference between success and failure when you're going through any kind of major transformation project. As I say, that's really intended to just be a bit of a tease to convince you to go and read the full report. The report itself is about 50 pages long. It dives into a huge amount of detail on all of this stuff. If any of those points that I raised are interesting and you'd like to double click on them and spend a bit of time exploring them in detail, make sure you download the report when it comes through to your inbox just straight after this session. But what we are going to do now is actually double click on it as a group here with our esteemed speakers, starting with Sanjay. What I'd like each of you to do, speakers, if you can just bring yourself online, tell us a bit about yourself and your organization, and then just give us your first impressions of the research. Sanjay, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks very much, Nick, for inviting me over here and having a very distinguished panel here as well. Let me pick up that word, Voyage dilemma, to start my introduction. I think a major part of my 3 decades in various roles has been where I've spent some element of being a part of that Voyage dilemma. So my earlier part was a sea career, spent a few years at sea. And the major part of the last 2 decades, I've been in thick and thin doing voyage operations. And that brings me back to, reading this report in some shape and form. I'm glad we were able to contribute in some sense into this report. It just comes and culminates into something very close to my heart, in the sense we have seen our journey, how voyage operations is done. Till date, while you can see a lot of changes coming with digitization and decarbonization to add to it, I think there is a lot of impetus required to look at how currently voyage operations is being managed. It in fact takes me back, and I'd like to take an example of going back to sea. And a lot of the guests who've been at sea can connect to this. Is the time when we used to be on board ships, and this is 2 decades back, we used to be on a bridge managing paper charts, managing a position being taken, plotting that. Then, depending on the situational awareness that is needed, you're looking at the radar, you're looking at an ARPA, trying to figure out everything, and then trying to get completely situationally aware as well. What's happened now, which I have actually not seen because I left sailing a few years back, is the electronic charts. Right there, sitting at the center, you're able to catch up every element in a single window. That is exactly what I could relate to seeing and reading about Voyage Operations Suite. So in a nutshell, I think it's a great idea and thought to work on. Just to add on to my introduction part, I've been for the last 5 years associated with GeoServe. which was essentially built on setting up pillars of services within the Voyage operation module, be it the bunker procurement side, the agency disbursement accounting, and the performance and emissions. These are the 3-4 pillars that we have worked GeoServe on. And then on top of this, to talk of something like this is just the right fit to bind things together.
Thank you, Sanjay. I think that shift from doing stuff on the bridge of the ship to monitoring stuff on the bridge of a ship is a great analogy for what this kind of level of automation can potentially allow. Lee, why don't you go next?
Sorry, thanks, Nick. Hi, I'm Lee Steve Middleton. I'm president at Sedna. I spent the last 20 years working in software, everything from running my own startups to building large-scale data-driven platforms across manufacturing and financial services before joining Sedna 5 years ago. I joined in a product capacity, so I've been running product and engineering here before moving into my most recent role as president. I support Bill running the day-to-day operations of the business, whilst still being highly involved with the product and engineering teams alongside Bill. If you don't know Sedna, so we started as an email platform, say 7-8 years ago now. But today, Sedna is a purpose-built operating system for global trade, one that automates, enriches, and visualizes critical information so that businesses can move faster with more clarity and less risk. So actually, a lot of what you were talking about, Nick, resonates really, really heavily with the things that we're doing and have been doing for the last couple of years at Sedna. You know, turning unstructured, high-volume communication into structured, searchable, and most importantly, actionable intelligence. I think, I was just taking some notes as you were speaking. I think a couple of things really stand out to me because, Paolo and Aditya will have a very different perspective, and Sanjay also has a perspective from being on both sides of the fence. But when, we see the most successful I guess engagements with our customers is when we have a partner. And I think people really do overestimate the effort and the energy the transformation piece takes. And when we have a partner on the customer side who really plugs in and is very clear about what they're trying to achieve, we see that the most impact is delivered fastest on those occasions. So really excited to dig into that further.
Fantastic. I definitely want to come back to that point on having a partner and how you manage the change process, because it is, I think it's the biggest or it's the most underestimated challenge. Paolo?
Hello. So Paolo Vaccaro from D'Amico Shipping. I'm based in Singapore. And I was a very something about myself just to introduce. I've been an engineer, and then I've been an engineer at heart all of my life. So in a sense that when I was stopping my sailing time, I was going into the industrial automation. So I was seeing some piece of technology that was really in love from the very beginning, right? So being an engineer mind, or I'd say what you believe you are in the definition of engineering mind. So my journey from that time I was coming back into shipping, 97 till now, is a kind of discovery of what finally we are about to achieve. Say that the road has been very long and difficult to put together, but I see finally that our historically conservative industry made of different stakeholders that are reasoning on different bases, where we don't have clarity on the information, is slowly coming to a point where we can really looking forward to the next step. The next step, as you've been currently introducing, and your research is probably highlighting in a very perfect way, is that we are closer than ever to start a proper journey that is not just promising love, let's say just promising miracles, because unfortunately, like in any automation system, you can see you start from the data and you start from the people really liking to share the data, and so focusing on what is important the most out of the data. This is a part of the process that is taking a long time. It's taking efforts, change management inside the companies, throwing away eventually things that you have been doing up to yesterday and reworking in a different way. So this is very tough. And as you like say, probably from your point of view of software suppliers, software companies, you see very well that you can easily promise the magic, but the things are happening when you have somebody that is really plug in, right? Plug in means having clear ideas on where to go. And we are all here for the same reason, let's say. I believe all companies we are representing here are having one or more or less, let's say, having taken a position into this kind of path. And some companies are more ahead than others, but I believe all of us have been having clear in mind that this is the step forward.
Yeah, I think it's almost the presentation betrays how much energy and effort goes into those kind of transformations. It's a big undertaking, and I know you've done a huge amount of work in Demica in the last few years on that, so we'll definitely dive into that in detail. But before we do, last but by no means least, Aditya.
Well, thanks, Nick. I've been in the industry all my life. I started at the age of 18, so it's been a few decades. I was sailing initially, and I sailed as a captain, and then I've come ashore. I've worked on the ship management side, but I spent most of my time at Scorpio, all close to 10 years, involved with voyage operations and various other verticals within that and associated with that. And then I've been with Maersk Tankers for close to 6 years, also doing various things. And apart from being head of operations, I was also leading a third-party commercial management service, as well as leading the team in India. That's about me. But as far as the topic is concerned as well, I think it's been quite interesting to read about the report, to see the report and learn the findings. I would say there's no real surprises there. Anyone that's been involved in any kind of transformation, I think it's been a while since there's been this real push to say, okay, everyone starts talking about digital transformation, and then you find two new softwares that are sort of turned up and thrown up on the employees and saying, okay, this is digital transformation. But of course, there's so much more involved. And from that perspective, I think it's really important to try and figure out not just, every company is different, every situation is different, every requirement is different. And you could be a small setup with one person who can manage everything end to end, and there's no handovers. So their needs will be different to when you have a very large organization. And I think one has to be mindful of that. And it's not just about the product, but also about what are you trying to achieve there, and the scale involved. I think the one key thing is also in terms of who's taking the decisions around all of that, and what are you trying to achieve, and how do you view success within that. So I think I've been involved in some transformations as well, and again, that's always an interesting journey. But yeah, that's a little bit about me, and this is obviously something very close to my heart. And at the end of the day, shipping, I think the job of the ship is the same, for the last few centuries, which is to carry cargo and people from one place to the other. The ships themselves have evolved, but the purpose is the same. Purpose hasn't really changed. And I think, sure, of course, now technology evolves faster than we breathe, right? So I think it's something to leverage, and hopefully we do that better.
Thank you, Aditya. I'm going to come straight back to you with a follow-up if I can. But before I do, sure. You'll see on the bottom of the Zoom panel here, there's a little Q&A function. What we always do in these sessions is we get far too many questions in the last 5 minutes to be able to answer, and usually not enough right at the beginning. So I'll just encourage you, if you're sat in the audience, to use the Q&A function. If you think of something, either a point you want to make or a question you want to put to the panel, ask it now, and then we'll come to it later. So please don't be shy. Please feel free to put questions into this panel of experts. But sticking with you, Adichie, you mentioned about the issue of potentially just adding more software and thinking that is some kind of transformation. I'd be interested to know from your experience, how many systems are actually being used to manage a single voyage across all of these stakeholder groups, and whether you can share any examples of these systems potentially not working well together or leading to data silos that actually lead to inefficiency.
Yeah, so I think traditionally, you have a separate voyage management system. I have also seen in my experience there are companies managing large portfolios that don't have those, and then it's sort of back to be a good old Excel sheet. But then, within the voyage management systems, there are certain functions that you can cater to, but not everything. And then you have others that we lean on. So I think typically in my last organization, I mean, we had at any given point you would have at least 5 different softwares that needed to talk to each other, right? You had the voyage management system, and then you had a separate system that would take care of your weather routing, that would take care of your bunkers, and so on and so forth. And then you had a separate one for the port costs, separate one for fuel optimization and fuel tables management. And then, of course, apart from that, then you have all the financial systems and the vendor management systems. But for us, it was quite key that all of these systems spoke to each other, right? I mean, and again, we had the scale that was necessary to be able to do this quite effectively. So it was very important that they worked seamlessly, integrated seamlessly, went back and forth, without too much hitch. But manual entries, when you talk about and how data silos, I think that's quite key, because the fact is, at the end of the day, you have a ship that's at one end of it. And in my opinion, it's very hard to sort of say, oh, we will do away with manual entries, because someone's going to do it somewhere, right? I mean, it's either going to be starting at a ship where someone has to put in those details as to what's going on. Hey, this is what's happening now. So it's just more about avoiding the repetition and the duplication of doing it ashore as well, which is when you have all these errors creep in. But it's inevitable that when you have a large company, you have different functions catering to different parts of the business, which means maybe you have a separate claims and demurrage team, you have a separate port cost team, and then there are handovers that happen between the operational function and these functions, and that's where it's quite critical how you do that and how you manage that and how manual that is where a lot of people can drop the ball. And if you're not sure of the gaps between the chairs, then you end up with a lot of costly errors, mistakes, missed things, heartbreak. so yeah, everything.
Sanjay, I'd be interested in your view on that. Did you talking about trying to avoid the repetition, recognizing that there'll be some manual entry somewhere, but trying to avoid repetition, and that's where people kind of drop the ball, moving data between those systems. When you tend to go into a shipping company right at the beginning of engaging with them as a customer, what do you tend to find, and where are you seeing the biggest set of these kind of this fragmentation that we talked about?
I think Aditya just spoke before and hit the nail on the head. While he was conservative enough in saying 5 VOS systems, it probably goes into more as you look at a company which may not be having that scale. And what we have realized over a period of time is there is always a challenge for an operator, and I'm just wearing the shoes of an operator, to prioritize. There are elements which suddenly come on priority. Things need to be done right there and then. The actionable elements are much more at the time, as opposed to you have the time to sit back and do it the next day. And while this is happening, you can let the ball down. You can have issues which can be missed, and you as an operator in operations are taking care of the bottom line. That's in your hands. Now, if that bottom line are elements which are spread out across different platforms, there are many times that you're going to kind of miss out a couple of things, which otherwise, if you had everything consolidated and coming to it sounds that everything can be consolidated. No, there's still elements which are going to be manual. However, the process of safeguarding and the time element and also getting more efficiency for an operator can only happen if you start to build something like a suite. And to the point of a voyage management system, which Aditya pointed out, absolutely. The key to managing the financial accounting and the P&L is what the voyage management system is doing. But where can you gather more efficiency in running operations? That's where I think the whole idea of this voyage operations suite kind of fits in well and tying everything up together.
So to clarify that, the voyage management system will show you where the P&L's at, but the voyage operations suite will show you essentially what you need to change or optimize to improve that position. Is that fair?
Absolutely. That's
Okay.
How it sums up as the difference between the two.
Yeah. Traditionally, Lee, the glue that holds all of these different disparate systems that are fragmented together has been email. And obviously that's where Sedna started. And I would say probably email is still a pretty core component of any operations. I'd be interested in your view. What do you see as the kind of fragmented nature of the kind of operator's desk today, and is it changing?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I think we still very much believe, I can't remember who said it, but I think it may even have been you, Nick, but you can't change everything all at once overnight, particularly at the speed of change with technology. And even more so now, AI is so prevalent. So for us, email, we believe very strongly, and we see it day in, day out with all of our customers. Email is still very central to the way shipping companies, trade businesses operate and function. And we don't see that changing anytime soon. It's also the easiest way to move large and complex, unstructured sets of information or data around the world. Now, I think the key for getting some of that intelligence and making it actionable, words a few people have used now, is to not force the user or the company to try and structure the way they are inputting that information. Documents, take Noon reports, for example, same set of information over and over and over again, but always delivered slightly differently. And that's the same across the board. I think the key for us and the way we are approaching this is to organize that as soon as it comes into the system. And then to find those touch points, whether it's an integration or whether it's an additional set of tooling that we've built ourselves, is then move the information around in a way that makes most sense, that allows people to do their work most efficiently. A couple of things that I think on top of that, when we're thinking about this connected or kind of integrated suite, what's really important is that whilst lots of companies in this space, not only us or GeoServe, are trying to build an OS or a suite of tools, we see many examples where those suites are closed. And one thing that we also believe very strongly is that they remain open. So when we think about, I've seen one of the questions in the Q&A, when we think about how AI and these new technologies are influencing the way we're thinking about design and development of our suite of tools, is that we've actually built a programming language to allow customers, partners, or anyone to build applications on top of email as well, and including ourselves, which gives the businesses that buy our software the flexibility to either choose something from our stack, build something themselves, or integrate with anyone else. And I think that concept of not being locked in that you described as part of the research, both in terms of contract length and I think going all in on a single provider, is very key, because the speed at which technology is advancing, who knows what's going to happen in 12 months, what new technology is out there. So when we are speaking to companies, it is also our advice that you remain flexible, because someone may deliver a slice of the workflow, and that's how we look at it. These are all these pieces of software are literally bits of the workflow. We believe the platform is still communication because that's how the business operates. People, you know, converse to do business. But all these workflows, you know, who knows what's coming and who knows what might be valuable around the corner. If you're locked into one vendor, it's going to be very hard to find the best tool for the job.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I want to come back to that question around lock-in, flexibility, integration, because I think it's super important, and often it's a decision you can make potentially a long time ago, and you don't realize the consequences for 4 or 5 years potentially. Before we go on to that, though, I just want to bring Paolo in on. I know you've been on a bit of a transformation journey within D'Amico over the last few years, and on Lee's point of not trying to do everything all at once. Where did you start, and were there particular areas, whether it's, you know, bunkering, emissions, or routing, something like that, that gave you the best you know, early return on going down this kind of integration journey?
Well, listen, as has been said so far, there are so many things you can touch upon, right? And of course, we have been starting from for the core of the system, imagining that to try to choose what was the most promising solution, let's say, in the industry, and to start upon that to integrate what are the other solutions that have been, in our opinion, interesting for the industry. So it's this process of narrowing down the enormous amount of solution that you can find. That I would say that, as I was saying in the introduction, the world, our world is very creative in this moment, and I'm very excited about that. So we are closer than ever to any potential solution to integrate things, etc., etc. But of course, you start from a very simple element. One element is the email system that has to be an element that is allowing you to put other things together. The other element is your VMS system, let's say, so the place where you want to transform and translate the information, the product of your action to down the line to the company. And then, of course, you have another very, very important point, that is the navigational and emission aspects. Nowadays, these are things still in progress, in my opinion, because in particular with the emission, I see that there is still, we haven't not masterized yet the situation properly overall, no? Because we are still in a kind of phase. We are still balancing what is supposed to be done, what has been done, how much does it cost. All these kind of elements are not extremely clear, or let's say, can be potentially clear, but we don't have the effect of slap in our faces yet. So that's why we are still taking a bit of time to understand really the truth or the potential impact, right? But all these kind of things are the ones that have been prioritized, let's say, and so the communication aspects and becoming at least more cooperative in exchanging information in this respect has been always has been, at least for us, the focus, let's say. I must say.
That's really interesting. That the starting point is around exchanging information between stakeholders, because I think when you equip people with the right information, it allows them to possibly think more commercially rather than just operationally.
Yes,
think about
it's not easy. It's not easy, because it takes a change. It takes a mental change into that, and we're still, notwithstanding, I'm not a young fox, let's say, but I'm very much focused on the fact that these kind of things in other industries have been happening many years ago. And this is also possible for us, notwithstanding we are a conservative industry, notwithstanding we are an industry that is working the same way since centuries, and it's been always happening and will always be happening in the future, etc., etc. So we must be clever. We are a generation that has to be clever to leave all the people coming in the industry now a chance to develop from where we start, let's say. It's time. It's definitely time.
Sanjay, can I get your view on making that change and how to make that change, or how to change mindsets at a customer effectively?
I think I'll pick up that word one of the panelists said, is partnership, collaboration. change is not easy. And I'll speak not just for shipping. Change management is a process which needs a lot of thinking, participation. There are challenges that when I'm speaking just the normal sense of change always comes with a sense of resistance as well. And it's extremely important to start, and our journey so far in GeoServe has also been where we've put our products and then adopted clients. We've always seen that it has to start right from the bottom. It also has to start in seeing where is the value addition coming to the end user. What is the benefit coming out? Where is the optimization? Are you able to, in a tangible way, measure the change? This is extremely important, because otherwise, if you tend to bring technology and just say this is going to change the way, and I don't want to say shipping is conservative, but at the same time, just what Paolo said, that we are also changing while the rest of the world has changed, just reiterates that fact. It is extremely important that you go hands in glove in making sure the change is well taken in, understood, and participated before you bring about that change. So I think it's an important cog in the wheel here, that you can't just force and bring change by technology. It has to be hand in glove with the participants.
I think
and the end users.
Measuring change, I think, is really interesting, because I think that's often something that is actually quite hard to do. And again, it's something you need to think about in advance. You can't just decide 3, 6, 9, 12 months down the line that now you need to start measuring whether you've been successful or not. Aditya, within Maersk Tankers, what were some of the success metrics you would look at when you're trying to do these transformation projects? Were there particular numerical measures you could bring in, or was it more of a sense that things were going in the right direction?
I think we particularly, I think that organization particularly enjoys having stuff that can be measured. And I think they've been around for a century, so they have a fair idea of this is how we drive success. But in terms of, the transformation itself, I think the one thing that I found worked for me was that in terms of, in terms of making a framework, it was always useful to get, the team leads and the functional heads involved in making the actual framework. But in preparing the playbook or what you want to achieve finally, it was very crucial that you had sufficient representation from end users, which then helped to drive success, because you got the relevant buy-in rather than just the feeling that, okay, this is being thrust down their throats as one more change and one more technological product that needs to be used. And I think that was very, very critical in driving success across board. Coming back to your question, I would say that we did have certain ambitions around what did we really want to achieve by it. I mean, why do you want to do the transformation? So it's very important to start from that. Okay, what do you hope to achieve out of it? Otherwise, it's just pointless, right? So I think for us, it was a few different factors. One was around efficiency, one was around employee engagement, for example, and then in terms of PCE impact as well. So there were these three main sort of focus areas for us, and then we had certain ambitions around that, and I think we did do pretty well on that. There was one other thing that we measured, but it was a slightly different way of looking at things. Was can we then manage with different kinds of talent pool? If we were the sort of, can we then not necessarily need a particular type of person who has been out at sea who can understand how this thing is going to run? So for different parts of the business, then you can have people who have different talent skills, but then you can lean on each other. And I think that certainly helped us as well.
I think that's really interesting, that just the kind of the order of doing things, building the buy-in and building the consensus first before you look to try and put metrics on it, I think is a really valuable insight.
Yeah, I think you also need people to come up with the metrics themselves sometimes. So right. I think that really helps, because again, it's one of those things. Okay, I would like to say, hey, okay, how much do you think, or what can we do differently here? What kind of measures do you want to put in? And then maybe you have, as a leader, a different kind of impression, whereas someone, an end user may day to day be able to say, this is what I can impact. Because at the end of the day, it's also about driving better behavior. So I think, so that becomes quite important, is including them in how do you want to measure and define themselves.
Yeah, and I guess not just saying these are the metrics. You need to follow them. If people are bringing the metrics or the ideas of the metrics to you, I can see how they would naturally want to improve them. We've had loads and loads of questions, so I'm going to dive into them, and I'll perhaps start with one which I'll send to Lee, if that's all right. Asking the AI question, which I think was inevitable. How is AI influencing the way new processes are designed and implemented?
Good question. I mean, I think it's definitely making us think about how we approach things differently, both in terms of our own processes. But this isn't necessarily about that, so I won't go into that side of it too much. But I think for our customers and the industry as a whole, I think, you know, it's important that you don't see AI as a silver bullet to solve everything. It's still very nascent, still very early. As much as, you know, you hear a lot about AI in the news, and if you follow technology, you know, it's everywhere. But we've seen this before, right? Now, I think, you know, there are lots of examples like blockchain in the past, and I'm not saying AI is that, absolutely the opposite of that, but it's about being very careful how much you invest in AI at this stage as a shipping company. And even for a software business like us, we're looking at using AI in very deliberate and very specific areas of the platform to solve very, very narrow problems, which is where right now it's most effective. And obviously the rate of change and evolution of AI is extremely quick. It's fast, it's happening, it's evolving, it's getting better all the time. But it's not a kind of a solution to all of your problems, is what I would say. But it is certainly where there is a very narrow, just going back to what Aditya was saying, where you have a very clear idea of a problem, you have a very clear idea of where you want to, you know, improve a process or, you know, provide a specific solution, then there are lots of ways in which AI can be applied. But I think that the key is choosing very specific examples and being very deliberate about how you work with the technology.
Yeah, I think taking the technology first approach to anything is hugely problematic. It's got to be problem first and very, very clear before you pick the right technology. And the way we think of AI is it's just a tool in the toolbox. It's not the be all and end all.
I've seen a couple of examples of that in our industry already, where people have tried to build LLMs from scratch, like whether or not they were intending to build LLMs or not, but like that's a really big problem. And again, like, what is it solving? Frankly, there are tools on the market that are now exceptionally good at understanding our industry, and a lot of money and time was wasted on those. So.
Yeah, makes sense. Sanjay, is there a concrete example of a company orchestrating the process from start to finish?
Could you repeat your question?
Sure. Is there a concrete example of a shipping company orchestrating their processes from start to finish?
Yes, why not? I mean, you know, you look at any transformation that we've seen so far, it has to start, as I mentioned earlier as well, right at the base. It has to start by active participation of the end user. And I think I need to highlight where we come from. We've been on the other side. We have been the end user. For us to touch base on the challenges that are associated, we carried it when we started working on providing a solution and a service associated with it. But I must add one other element which is very important in this discussion, and I go with you know, the AI discussion that you've taken forward as well. Unified data is super important, especially on what we are representing with respect to commercial operations, and that can be a trade-off if you're working on separate verticals and separate systems, unless you're a company of that scale which can build a data lake, get all the data in, and then start talking about AI. So in some ways, working on a suite helps you get the data together so that they can talk to each other, structure it in a way, and then start working on, you know, these new tools that are coming in the market.
Yeah, we talk in the report about the concept of a sort of commercial control tower, where you have, as you say, Sanjay, unified data that can act as a single source of truth to surface information to decision makers, but then also to make sure that everyone is singing from the same hymn sheet across the organization. And I think that's a really important point that often gets missed, but it's quite a big concept, so I decided not to include it in the presentation. But if that's interesting, then definitely go and download the report. Aditya, one for you. You mentioned that, excuse me, sorry. You mentioned that just adding more software vendors doesn't lead to digital transformation. How valuable is it that these software vendors are already integrated with one another in advance? And does this influence your chosen software supplier for a particular solution?
100%. I think it makes a big difference. And sometimes, they have, sometimes it makes the difference in the decision, in my opinion. Especially if you're sort of choosing two products, one of which will integrate seamlessly with your existing one versus something that's not integrated. But, of course, it's never set in stone. And if someone demonstrates that they can comfortably integrate, and, these days it's not extremely challenging, but, people say, okay, we have APIs and they speak to each other. But for us, there are different layers to it. One is just one information transfer to each other. One is when they talk to each other at every stage. And then, it basically means that every action taken at either of those vendors or the softwares will lead to an update on the other side and actions thereafter. But certainly it makes a big difference. And I think otherwise you're only adding work to your team and making it more inefficient and opening up potential for errors and mistakes. Whereas on the other side, that's not really the whole idea of getting into a software. You need to make things easier, not harder.
Nick,
Thanks.
if I may just add,
Sanjay.
Yeah, one more element, because I think this element of integration is very important in the context here, and I think that was one of the slides you showed as well. There are 4 stages here that we talk about. This staggered data. There is a connected setup, which is what I think Aditya was highlighting, where you're kind of connecting through APIs, but the step ahead to that is integrated, which is where you have the data together coming from various sources, 5, 10 sources together. Only that will lead us to the so-called intelligent operations, which is the next step in this journey where AI and ML will start to look at. But I think first and foremost is to start targeting how can I make the true integration before we move on to intelligent. Connected, yes, we are. Systems talking to each other, just to the effect that information can flow, say, in a VMS and help you in the PNL. But the overall engagement process, I think you need data together so that you can take more conscious decisions, live action available to you, and look at that bottom line.
There's a point that was made or asked actually about connected systems versus truly integrated ones, and whether that is illustrated anywhere in a video or document. And the good news is that it is. It's covered in depth in the report. So to the person who asked that, when the report comes to your inbox in the next 10 minutes or so, I recommend you sit down and go through that in detail. But I think that point you made, Sanjay, about you can have 2 applications that might be connected to each other, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of your operations and data are integrated so that you get to that single source of truth. However, there's a really interesting question raised, and perhaps Paolo, I'll send this in your direction. How do you avoid disruption during the integration phase, especially when operations cannot afford any downtime? And I think that's one of the reasons we're so reliant on spreadsheets in this industry, because the spreadsheet works 100% of the time, even if it's not the most efficient way of doing things. So how do you manage that risk when you're trying to integrate this stuff?
Yeah, I believe was the first thing I saw in my history of computer use. Lotus 123 was the spreadsheet that I was learning first at the very beginning of my career. And it's still there. Of course, the backup plan is still there. Yes, 100%. Today we have a sort of redundancy, so we are quite sure that when you do this kind of jump, when you tend this integration and you are putting in place new tools, so you are always having a backup plan. And jokes apart, spreadsheets are always seriously, I believe, I cannot say 90%, 100%, 70%, but most of the companies are having this in mind, let's say. But it's true that now all the services that are part of the company are also having this kind of backup plan. So I was never worried, frankly speaking, about this kind of jumps. And when we've been attempting this, we've been making out of something that is not really something to be followed. So having personal and silent data as a backup plan. That was, in fact, one of the backup plan. But yeah, so far, so good. I must say that we are in a level of availability of technology and way of integrating the same that is very, very good. So all the solutions I see in the market are very good solution. I mean, in a sense of technologically speaking. So there are no downtime. There is no downtime. I believe now we are able to communicate. If you think about it, the level of communication that we are having nowadays, although imperfect, although not integrated completely, etc., is fantastic. We can fix ship on WhatsApp, right? We can send ships around the world using WhatsApp, and that's something that maybe doesn't tell everybody everything, but the gentleman that have been involved in the ship, like Sanjay and Aditya, knows quite well that we have been dreaming about this kind of communication. We have been counting the way to use the telexes in order to have efficient communication. So this is, in brief, let's say, without being too much nostalgic of times that are luckily gone. Say we have all the means to do proper things without disruption nowadays. Yes, absolutely.
I think it also comes back to this question around vendor flexibility and the willingness of vendors to integrate with other vendors in the market, because generally speaking, once those integrations are done and tested and live, they are, as you say, Paolo, they're very, very reliable. And I think often there's an issue of trust more than there is an issue of technology. We are unfortunately rapidly running out of time, although I feel like we could carry on for at least another hour. What I'd like to ask each of our speakers to do is just give us your final thoughts. If there's a ship operator in the audience, what's one thing that they should take back to their organization to try and implement to improve their operations based on everything we've talked about today? Lee, why don't you kick us off?
I think to summarize, clarity in what you're looking to achieve at what stage of the workflow, because ultimately there are a number of options, both maritime specific software providers, but also more and more non-maritime specific software vendors who are offering solutions that could have a huge impact on the day-to-day ways in which we work as an industry. So I think having real clarity on what it is you want to achieve, and then picking a solution that doesn't lock you into either a specific stack or a specific approach. I think the question of data, I mean, this industry has an enormous amount of data. Collecting it and gathering it is easier than ever. The challenge is making sense of it. And I can give examples of that from other industries that I've worked in, like manufacturing, which is super high frequency, high volume. Same with financial services. The challenge is most people don't know how to normalize it and make sense of it and then take action from it. So I think leveraging the right solutions to help you with that last bit is really key.
Thank you, Lee. And Aditya?
I think before you start adding, look at if you need to subtract something firstly. And, an operator's job, I think, is, just one part of it is what we've talked about today. I think a much larger part of them of their job is managing the commercial voyage elements around. There's so many things that go on, whether it's tank cleaning or documentation issues, ships getting delayed, a lot of the other stuff, right? That's so the whole core idea and philosophy should be that, okay, how can we free up their time to be able to focus on those rather than having to spend 30% of their time doing data entry and making mistakes which anyway lead to costly errors. So for me, I would say it's really critical that before you start adding stuff, hey, this is really nice, lots of bells and whistles, flashy software. Let's look at what we really want to achieve here. How can we sort of do this in a manner where we take away the data entry and inefficiencies from their day-to-day work, and overall, how as an organization you want to manage your P&L better.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tito. It's really valuable. Paolo?
But I can repeat exactly what Aditya was saying, but I cannot do it. So the question is, you have to have a focus on what you're looking for. You have to have a clarity on the path you want to follow. As an operator, say, starting from the last piece of the chain, so the operator, last in a sense, the one closer to the process, you must have something in front of you that help your day, and you must yourself be switch on in order to get the most out of the tools you have in front. So you don't have to be passive. You are still the most appreciated piece of intelligence in the equipment, even before the artificial intelligence. So that's what I'm saying to all the guys that are working here. You should be curious. You should be yourself the best part of the machine. The machine is just helping you out to sort out the rest. And again, you have to avoid let's say, using brains for, underusing brains. If you want to use the brains to make a proper decision instead of repetitive task. And that's what I hope every organization is able to achieve and drive as soon as possible.
Fantastic. I think that's great advice. Final word goes to Sanjay.
Right. First and foremost, I think there's a lot of work done in this report, so I would recommend everybody to have a look at this report. I've spent some time going through this myself. There is a lot of elements that you will take away from it. Let me just go with an anecdote, which I think my previous two speakers, we are all very similar. We are probably humming the same tune as well. I think operations is the center of and the fulcrum of executing a lot of elements to make this voyage run, make this voyage profitable. And the anecdote goes that, you're sometimes counted in operations by the number of fires you douse. The reason why that is because you're spread out with so much across board, and it is equally important that you start looking at, like I think Aditya mentioned, reduce the tools, keep them fewer, get more clarity, get more control, keep it simple. And I think one way to look at it is, this voyage operations suite that we're talking about looks to be a place where things can make life a lot simpler for the operator so that he can focus on making this voyage even more profitable.
Fantastic. It falls to me to try and summarize, and I think my major takeaway is actually the amount of groundwork that needs to be done before you even start looking at bringing in any technology. So everyone's mentioned clarity as a key point to look for, and that could mean taking things away, taking systems away, but really understanding what you're trying to achieve, building buy-in and consensus across not just the leadership team, but across all of the teams. Then start to look at the metrics of what success would look like. Then and only then can you start to engage with vendors because you have a really clear understanding of what it is that you want to get out of those vendors. And I think there's so much good advice come in this session around how to engage effectively with those vendors. Thank you so much to everyone for taking part in this. I'm so sorry we overran. It's just a signal for how much I've enjoyed the discussion. Thank you to GeoServe for commissioning this research in the first place and being such a fantastic partner to us. Thank you to Aditya, Paolo, Lee, and of course Sanjay for contributing so much expert insight to this. Thank you to all of you in the audience, and particularly all of those of you who asked questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them. We will follow up and put some of these questions out on social media instead. And have a wonderful day where you are in the world, and I hope you're able to take something from this that can improve your operations. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.